ownership. Again, more of that later. The next biggest bank after that has between 1.5 and 5%. So how does Antonio feel about that exposure position? More of that to follow. Government ownership. A lot of people ask me, when you tell them, which I will be telling you in a while, that we are open for business and we are lending money to property industry, 10% up year on year is our lending in the sector that I'm responsible for, which is the SME sector, which I believe is the sector that represents pretty much 80% of our ICS members. They ask me, what impact does the government ownership do? You're only lending the money now, or talking about lending it, because the government's told you to. Not true. Does that have an impact? Of course it does. But we are driving this from our own strategy, from our own need and desire to support industry in the community, and also, we're in business, we make money by lending money. So it is an impact, but it's not the overriding factor. So what else is on his mind? Well, we've already talked about legislation, Basel III and the like. The percentage figure that banks are pretty much obliged to keep now for every piece of property lending they do is 10% capital, which is up from sort of 6% or so a number of years ago. So it's a big number, and that will be on his mind for sure. What else is on his mind? Well, the wall, and wall I think is the operative word here, of property loans, which require refinancing. Barry talked about a figure of 200 billion. I think the figure is somewhere between 160 and 200 billion of property debt that will need to be financed between the next 2 and 3 years. And we've got a lot of that. The next one, profitability and liquidity. This is an interesting one. Lots of debate, really, over the last few years about how profitable is it to lend to property. When you factor in the associated risks, when you factor in that the property industry is very debt hungry and doesn't produce many deposit balances, which of course we as bankers love because then we can lend those out again. That will certainly be on his mind without a shadow of a doubt. And what about the impact of interest rates? How does he think about that? That will undoubtedly impact on serviceability and values. The prediction is a general decline this year of 2% values. That figure is quoted across both commercial and residential. Interestingly, or maybe not interestingly, but our view is that interest rates won't go up before the end of this year. That's our economics view. You'll have your own views on that, I'm sure. And he's concerned about this, as I know you will all be, I'm sure, about the widening gap between tertiary and primary yields between London and the regions. Approximately 80% of banking debt is in the tertiary sector. So that's an issue, for sure. So it is fair to say, one last one, I beg your pardon. And of course he's seriously interested in the robustness of the property economy. So it is fair to say that he's got a lot on his mind, and whilst he's worrying about that, he's signed up as part of his contractual arrangements to lending £12 billion to SMEs in the property sector as well as other sectors, but I'm here to talk about the property sector today. And significantly for us, this is more of an internal thing, but just this morning, my boss, the MD of our division, has been asked to report directly into him as a part of his ongoing operating practices, whereas previously there was another channel, if you like, between the two of them. I think that's significant, I think, because this man is very interested in how we support the SME sector. So Antonio, I think what I take on all that is welcome to the new normal, and it'll be interesting to see exactly what he makes of it. I've written down on my notes here, possibly recklessly, challenge the professor at this point, referring back to obviously Barry's session for those that were here this morning. Barry suggested that the property market was all bar closed, and I think I'll go on to talk about that's not the case for us. It is difficult in the top end sectors, but in the SME sector, which again I believe we represent, there is opportunity, and we're certainly, I've got a number of property managers here today, and we are certainly doing deals. I wish Barry was here to say that, but he's not, unfortunately. So we're going on the front foot, basically. So how are we supporting it? What exactly are we doing? Well, first of all, we've created 120 property specialists throughout the UK, so there will be one near you. There are a number of them in the room today who would love to talk to you, I'm sure. These people will be, the expression I used, immersed in the sector. All of their customers will be investors, developers, or people such as yourselves engaged in the property industry. They will receive extensive training. Like you, they will do CPD. You will see them at your RICS events as part of our relationship with the RICS, and they will increasingly become part of the local landscape. These people have authority to lend in the locality and are lending. 10% lending growth, as I say, in 2010, which in approximate terms comes to about £2 billion growth. I just want to talk briefly about building relationships with the industry bodies. Obviously, you're aware of the RICS relationship, of which more in a second. We're also working very closely with other industry bodies like ALA, the Association of Residential Letting Agents, National Landlords Association. We are attending a breakfast meeting with Grant Shapps in a couple of months' time, which will be interesting. And really what that is all about, and when I've been involved in discussions with RICS over the last 14 months in putting this relationship together, I think the thing that appealed to them was that we were not just interested in lending money or pure commerciality. We were actually interested in being what we call a force for good in the industry, helping to lobby on some of the issues that are taxing you and are taxing your property clients, just in the same way that the RICS has its Royal Charter and treats that very seriously, then we treat our community responsibility very seriously. So if we're doing our job correctly, I really believe that you will see a lot more of us as a voice in industry articles, in the marketplace, as trying to help support the industry and working very closely with yourselves. We do have a dedicated credit team that just deal with property, and our approach is one of through the cycle. As in, you have good customers, you invest time in them, you build deep relationships with them, and support them in good times and bad. And we have as many good turnaround stories to tell you as in a business has got into difficulty and we've supported them out of it, as we have new business stories. And that's important to us. Something you'll hear more about through your local regional offices, we created a thing called a 2012 charter, which is all about transparency to our customers, not imposing extraordinary interest rate rises on them, not pulling facilities on them, etc., 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 like some of our competitors do. But also a part of that is that we will put on 200 events around the country for the education of our customers. And to give you an example of what sort of things they include, there will be a module about access to finance. You would expect that. There will be a module about sustainability. Big issue for you, I know. Big issue for us as well. And there will be other components which are about helping our customers to be more successful. They're not a selling forum. You as RICS members are invited to come along to those, and you'll read more about that in the correspondence that lies ahead. And also they may count for CPD. Okay, so just in closing off on that one, I really just want to say that I believe this is a different approach to the approach that we're seeing elsewhere in the industry, which is more one of, close the shutters down, batten down the hatches, and, let's see what we can do. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute here that everything is rosy in the property garden. Of course it isn't. But I think, now is the time to say, well, what practical positive actions can we take to support the industry? And I want to just talk about the actual specifics of the RICS relationship. And there are really two elements to it. There are access to discounted banking services. If you go on the RICS Members Benefit Plus site, you'll see all about this. Bank charges, card processing, personal bank accounts, lending, you name it, it's all on there. Charter events I've already talked about. Awards, event sponsorship we can do, and before you all leap forward, we've already received a lot of interest from members around the country about will you support this event and all the rest of it. We do what